Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do on this is seal up the top end. The first thing I'll start off by doing is oiling up the wrist pin bearings, and then we'll hang the pistons on the rods, and I'm not going to put any rings on. I want to check those to the cylinder and make sure that we've got proper ring gap. That's a real critical thing, is to have your ring gap set right on these things. Usually it's pretty close, but you know, you always want to check. So like I mentioned earlier, I've got an oil can that's full of Castor 927, and that's what I'm going to use to lubricate these wrist pin bearings, and we'll get going. I'm just going to give them a spin here, work that oil in there. That's about all it takes. Now this thing will smoke quite a bit when we first start it up. This is a lot of excess oil, but you know, smoking a lot and having excess oil doesn't hurt anything. So I'm going to go ahead and do my thrust washers here. Now I talked about doing this earlier, but I didn't actually do it. I was just talking about it, and now I'm actually doing it. What I'll do is spin the motor around here so I can access the rod bearing on this side. And this stuff will flow right in. There is a real light oil on this right out of the box, but I'm going to put a little more on here. So now that that's done, we've got our new pistons here. These are Wiseco 795s, and I just want to clarify something here. I have heard too many times that when you run a stroker crank you need to use 795 pistons. That's bullshit. When you run a long rod you need to use 795 pistons. The only thing that makes this piston special is that it's got the pin height moved up 5 millimeters. So to say that every stroker crank needs special pistons, it's just not true. There's plenty of people out there that run 4 mil with a short rod. There's guys out there that run a stock stroke with a long rod. There's plenty of different ways, or plenty of different options to build one of these engines. Yeah, in this video here we are building a 4 millimeter stroke, and we are using a connecting rod that's long, so we will be using these pistons, these 795s, but we're only doing that because of our longer rod, not because of the stroke. So guys that are on YouTube and are talking about, oh, you gotta have 795 pistons, that's bullshit. You only need these pistons when you got a long rod. So it's got nothing to do with the stroke. The stroke is going to be there no matter what. What we're going to do on this engine to accommodate for the stroke is we're going to use a custom cut dome for our cool head. It's recessed a couple of millimeters. That's all you need, and that's going to take up the extra stroke. We're going to go down the cylinder farther, and we're going to come up out of the cylinder farther, and there's nothing wrong with that. But here's our pistons. They're brand new. I always send these out when I get cylinders machined, because I like these guys to take a measurement of our piston here. Wiseco does a good job manufacturing these things, but there are always times where you're going to have inconsistencies no matter what. And there's been a few times where I've had some pistons that, they were the same piston, but they were different sizes. And That's not uncommon. So what I'm looking for here are the circlips, which I don't see them. I'm sure in a hell not going to use the old ones. You know, you've seen me reuse a couple things throughout this build here. And some of the stuff I don't think it's crucial to have brand new stuff, but you know, there's other times where that's my rule. It's got to be new. Maybe it's still in the bag here. There's one. There's our other piston. There should be more circlips somewhere. Here we go. Alright. So we got them all. So what I'm going to do is pull these out of the bag here. Kind of a boring video, really. Doing top ends isn't really hard to do, and it's not really interesting. So what I like to do is I like to do the inside circlip first. It's really hard to access it. So what I'm going to do is get this thing started in here. These things will fight you too sometimes. When you're doing this, you want to make sure not to scratch the outside of the piston. Shouldn't take a lot of force to get these things to snap in. And if you are putting a lot of force on it and you happen to slip and your screwdriver gouges the side of the piston, you know, that's not good. You want to try to avoid that. So I just put this circlip in. I heard it fully seat in there. I do have it facing straight down. I hear that that's the way to do it. But so I've got that one in. What I'm going to do is take a little bit of oil, and I'm going to lubricate the area where the wrist pin slides through. We've already got our bearing lubricated here. There is an arrow on the exhaust side of this piston. That's what the arrow indicates, is the exhaust side. Plus, your intake windows are never going to be facing your exhaust. Never seen a piston in backwards before, but it is definitely possible. So we'll slide our pin in here. The reason I oiled the inside of the piston where the wrist pin goes is it makes this wrist pin slide in a lot easier. I say that, then it doesn't go. Typical. There it goes. Sometimes it's difficult to get it just right. I'm just using a screwdriver to push on the end of the wrist pin, don't worry. So that wrist pin's all the way in. Everything's nice and tight. Then we'll take the other circlip here. This is when it gets tricky, because you start getting all this excess oil on your fingers and stuff starts shooting all over the place on you. But just take your time and there'll be no worries. Alright, I heard that one snap in. Just did a visual on it, we're good to go. So there's one. And I'm going to spin the motor around and do the other one here. Alright, so we're going to check ring gap here. The way to do that is to grab one of those piston rings out of the bag, stick it in the cylinder there. I like setting mine up at about 4 thousandths ring gap. Got a standard feeler gauge here. And that gap in between the rings ought to be 4,000. Right where I've got it there, so we know we're good. And I'm going to check all of these. I want 4,000 on all of them. So what you're going to do, if you don't have 4,000s, if you've got 2,000s, or if you've got no ring gap, what you want to do is file the ends of the rings here. You can see those points there. And you want to file those down until you get that desired ring gap. That's an important step on these things. Like I said, this is kind of a high dollar engine here. And so you want to do everything you can to build this, you know, the right way. So what I'm going to do is get my ring gap, and then I'll get my rings on the pistons there, lay some base gaskets down, and we'll throw the cylinders on. Alright, now we're gonna, I did one cylinder here. I figured, you know, this is just such a boring deal here, but I'll do one cylinder, and basically all you want to do is squeeze the rings together. There's 2 locating pins on the piston, and those rings need to, the gap in the rings needs to line up with those locating pins. Those keep the rings from spinning around. If those locating pins weren't in the pistons, the piston rings would spin and they'd catch a port, open up, and then they'd break off, or, you know, get lodged in between the cylinder and the piston somehow. Get pretty ugly, so just pay attention to that. The one locating pin on the top is here, the one on the bottom is over here. You just want to rotate those rings around until you line them up with those pins. Give these things a really good squeeze, and just easily walk this cylinder on here. There's no reason to rush at this point. Just very easily walk it on here. And if you've got your proper ring gap, you shouldn't have an issue. So I've got it started here. Now what I'm going to do is line my cylinder up with these studs and just start walking this thing down. That's it. Alright, now what we're going to do is put the cylinder head on. This cylinder head is made by Pro Design. It's their cool head. And these are all brand new O-rings. You can see that these ones here are brown, and the ones around the outside are black. And the difference between these O-rings is that the black ones are a standard rubber, and the brown ones are high heat O-rings. They're known as Viton O-rings, and they will withstand the heat from the combustion chamber. So you don't need a Viton O-ring over here, because this is just on your water jacket side of the engine, and you shouldn't be much over 200 degrees with your water temperature, and 200 degrees won't hurt a standard O-ring, but a standard O-ring would not hold up over here on the combustion chamber side of things. So to put the cylinder head on, you've got to have it inverted, and you've got to slide it over all those studs. And something that'll really help keep these O-rings in place is some more of that petroleum jelly there. This stuff will just melt off once you start the engine. It'll just dissipate. It doesn't hurt anything inside the engine at all, but it'll keep these O-rings glued in. And I put a ton of it on here, and it helps just glue that in place. One of the worst things you can have happen is have one of these O-rings misaligned when you're putting the head on, and you'll lose compression, or you'll have a water leak, or something to that extent. So this is one of those times you want to be really meticulous in installing this. So this is ready to go. Alright, so it's update time on the motor here. Got the flywheel on. I just lined up that woodruff key in the crankshaft. That's the only thing you really want to pay really good attention to. Make sure that thing's in there the way it should be. Torque the nut down properly. On this motor, we're going to go with a 2-into-1 intake. Got that on, new reeds. I didn't film that because I'm pretty sure anybody knows how to do that. Got the head all torqued down, got the stud fixed, we're good to go there. So we're just doing a little last minute polishing here on the stator cover, and we'll get that put on, and then next video will be starting this thing.